Let me start from the beginning. It was a rainy evening when I called the Uber to pick me up from work. Normally I would walk, but the thought of a 45-minute trek back to my house in the pouring rain made me want to die. I worked in an office building downtown, slaving away at my computer for 10 hours a day before going home to wallow in my own self-pity. So the least I could do for myself was get a ride home. My Uber took forever and a day to pick me up. I stood under the entrance of the building, watching the little white car on the app slowly make its way to my location. My driver's name was Adam, no picture listed, but driving a white 2015 Toyota Corolla. I waited, killing time scrolling through my social media feeds, getting anxious from my feet starting to hurt in the stupid heels I thought would be smart to break in. Walking to work in heels was not an easy thing, let me tell you. As I waited for the driver, my phone started ringing. Looking at the caller ID, I saw it was my mother. She always has some sort of drama to make, but I had to ignore her last 3 calls, so I had to answer this time. Hello? Maggie, listen to what your brother did to me. Also, why did you not answer the phone yesterday and the day before? You know I'm getting older. You should just come visit me. I haven't seen you in a while, and it's getting lonely here all by myself. You haven't even been to see my new house yet. I rolled my eyes at my mother. She had a flair for the dramatics. I listened to her rant about how my brother didn't try her casserole when he recently came over to dinner, and how us children are so ungrateful. Relieved when I saw the gray Toyota Corolla pull up next to me. The driver just sat there, staring at the road, so I bent down and waved to him. He reached to the back seat and popped the door open. I gestured that I was on the call, but I quickly hopped in. The sooner I could get home, the better. The car started driving as soon as I was buckled in. It took me a little longer to do with only one hand while my mother was still yapping in my ear. I closed my eyes, relieved to be off my feet and out of the rain. The thought of getting home and laying in my bed was almost too enticing to bear. Finally, my mom took a breath, and I took advantage of the pause. Mom, give me your new address, and I'll come see you this weekend. She seemed pleased that I had asked, and happily rattled it off. I placed her on speaker for a minute so I could add it into my notes on my phone, and then brought her back up to my ear. I gotta go, okay? I'll call you tomorrow. I'm in an Uber right now, and it's rude to be on the phone. I could care less if I was being rude, but I really wanted to be off the call. You know, Margaret, one day you're going to call and I'm not going to answer. Then you'll really feel like a jerk. I rolled my eyes and disconnected the call. Like I said, my mother was very dramatic. She'd always answer when I called her. Finally, in silence, I closed my eyes and leaned my head back onto the headrest. Letting out a deep sigh, I let the jostling of the car soothe all my aches and pains. Letting my mind numb to the stress of the day, I felt the car jerk to a halt unexpectedly, and it pulled me back into reality. My head lurching forward and thudding unpleasantly back into the headrest. Dude, drive much? I had said with a sour tone. I was not in the mood. The driver said nothing. I leaned forward so I could get a better look at him, but I couldn't really see much. From the back, I was only able to see a mop of dark brown hair under a baseball cap. The rest of his face was turned away and hidden in the shadows of the night. Hey, I double-checked my app. Adam, right? Could you take it easier with the driving, man? I've had a really rough day and I would appreciate it. Maybe the nicer approach would work with this guy. He said nothing. He had no reaction at all. No nod of acknowledgement, no grunt in agreement, nothing. A trickle of unease coursed through me. Maybe I should walk the rest of the way, I thought to myself. I said, you know what? Actually, I realized I need to stop at the grocery store before I go home. If you want to let me off here, I can walk the rest of the way home. I unbuckled my seatbelt and put my hand on the door, waiting for the car to stop so I could get the heck out of there. I'm not sure what this guy's deal was, but he was starting to creep me out. Again, no reaction. Let me out of this car now. Nothing. My heart thudded in my chest as I really started to panic. I had to get out of this car as soon as possible. He continued on, and I looked around, realizing we were not driving the normal route that would have taken me back to my house. Instead, we were driving down a road that would eventually lead us out of town. Fuck, I thought to myself. I tried the door and realized it was locked. I couldn't get it open no matter how hard I tried. I looked around for a weapon, but I didn't see anything that I could use. The only thing back there was what I had brought with me, just my purse and my phone. Despair set in. I was about to be taken in the middle of nowhere and chopped up into little pieces, I thought. I don't know what his plan was, but I sure as shit thought it wasn't good. I rooted around in my purse for something I could use, but all I had was my wallet, a tube of chapstick, and some gum. Then I realized there was something I could use, my heels. I reached down and removed both of my heels in case I needed to run. Being barefoot would make me quicker. Gripping the heel in my hand, I waited until we rolled to a stop at a light, and then with all the force I could muster, I rammed the pointy end of my shoe right into where I guessed his eye socket would be. I knew I hit my target when he screamed in pain. I took advantage of this distraction and launched myself into the front passenger seat, making quick work of the lock, and thankfully the door opened when I pulled the handle. Wasting no time, I scrambled out of the car and ran into the general direction of where we had come from, leaving everything behind. Once I got closer to my job, I recognized where I was, and I ran until I thought my legs would give out. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment building, using my welcome mat key and running inside, bolting the lock behind me. I used the landline my mother insisted I still pay for to place my first 911 call. I gave the operator all of my info, and she said they'd send someone over, but since I was safe at home behind locked doors, I was not priority number one. The next call I placed was to my mother. After everything I went through tonight, I needed to talk to her, but she didn't answer. It's been hours now. The cops have come and gone. They tracked down the Uber accounts to a real user named Adam, who was not the guy whose car I got into. The real Adam showed up after I got in the car, and when he saw I wasn't there, he moved on. They have no idea whose car I got into, and they haven't been able to locate my phone. Moral of the story, be careful whose car you get into. I've called my mom 7 times now, and she still hasn't answered, which is completely out of character for her. She must still be mad at me for hanging up on her earlier. I think I'll go to her house and check up on her after I finish this, and smooth things over with her. This happened on my birthday, and I was with my best friend at her friend's house in an apartment building. Just your average party. We were all drinking and hanging out. My friend's friend introduces me to a guy at the party. I think his name was Ed, but I'm not positive. I talk to him a bit and go mingle. About an hour later, he finds me and starts talking to me again. He's an openly gay guy, I want to say in his late 20s maybe. I was 19 at the time. I talk to him again and he's totally nice and all, but just has a slight edge of loneliness to him. We talk again and I lose him in the party later. 2 a.m. hits, the party winds down, and my friends and I are heading out the door. And my friend says to me, "I'm starving. Let's go to Taco Bell." Ed hears this and says, "It's only 2 a.m. Don't go home. Come up to my apartment and chill, and I'll make you guys some food there." It seemed like a reasonable offer. The fact that he was obviously gay made us feel safer about the situation. We go upstairs and chill on his couch and watch TV while he makes us hot dogs and mac and cheese. We eat and talk to him for about 45 minutes. I told him I was getting pretty tired and that we'd better head home. Thanks a lot for the food, though. It was great, I tell him. But we should really be going. My friend stands up with me. Are you kidding me? He says. You just got here. I have dessert, too. Just hang for a bit. I even have blankets if you want to sleep on the couch. It's too late to be walking around. I hear that tone in his voice again. That sense of loneliness, this time tinged with a bit of desperation. I didn't feel any danger, though. Just felt sad for him. He seemed a bit lost. I'm sorry, we can't, I said. I walked towards the door, and he hesitated like he was going to say something, and then just shrugged and gave me a hug. We left the apartment and went home. About 3 months later, I was watching TV when a familiar face pops up on the screen. It was him. When I heard what he had done, it made me sick. He killed a man in his apartment, stabbed him 10 times in the chest. To think that we had eaten food this guy prepared for us and stayed in his apartment was mind-boggling to me. And I was just shocked that he could do something like this. I didn't know him very well, I grant you that, but he didn't seem like he could do something so horrible. This has given me a new outlook on life, and I am not as trusting as I used to be, for better or worse, I guess. I know one thing. I will never forget the nice guy in apartment 3B. For some background, there's an app called Life 360 where you can add your friends and family on, and essentially you can see all each other's current and past locations. You can set alerts to be notified when someone comes home or leaves, arrives at work, etc. It's really good and I recommend it to everyone. You can never be too safe nowadays. 2 months ago, I was at home waiting for my boyfriend to get home, and I got an alert around 1800 letting me know that he had left work. It usually took him around 45 minutes to get home. I got up from the sofa and headed upstairs to run myself a bath. My bath was ready in about 10 minutes, and as I was doing other bits, as I was waiting for it to cool, when I heard a thud downstairs, and through the closed bathroom door assumed that was the front door. I shouted something along the lines of, "I'm taking a bath." I heard him walking along our very creaky floorboards and assumed he was in the kitchen grabbing some dinner. It was about 5 minutes later when I picked up my phone to put on some music, and I realized I never got an alert on my phone from Life 360 saying that my boyfriend had arrived home. So I went into the app, and I kid you not, my blood ran cold when I saw that my boyfriend had stopped at a petrol station and he was still about a half an hour away. I could still hear the floorboards creak downstairs, very lightly, as if someone was trying to tiptoe but was unable to. I had no idea what to do. I called my boyfriend, he didn't answer. And when I didn't hear his phone ring from downstairs, I freaked out even more. I have horrible anxiety, and I could feel an attack coming on. I left the bathroom and walked into the bedroom, as quietly as I possibly could. I shoved my desk chair under the knob as I didn't have a lock. I don't know why, but I didn't think to call the police then. I was so focused on getting out that all my other thoughts and senses just disappeared. I say this lightly now, but this was not the case in the moment. I proceeded to basically Mission Impossible it out of the bedroom. We had a shed under the window large enough for me to safely get on top of it and then jump off from it onto the garden. The only issue was that I had to make my way down the garden alley where I would have to walk past the large window and door, where he would be able to see me very clearly. I was so scared. I kept taking peeks into the window and couldn't see anyone. I felt more confident to run past, and took one last peek, and he was there, looking right at me, not even a foot away from the window. I can't even begin to explain the sheer fear and horror that I felt. Looking him right in the eyes, he had such a cold expression, totally emotionless. I ran, didn't look back. I was so fucking terrified. I remember nearly tripping in my slippers and having to shake them off so I could run faster. There's a long road between us and our neighbors, where I was running to. I did make it. Their lights were on, and I started pounding on their window. I was let in, and they called the police for me, as I was inconsolable at this point. I kept telling them to please call my boyfriend, as he was driving home as well. When the police arrived, they found no one there. We didn't have any cameras, and neither did my neighbors. So we had no way of telling when or how he entered and when he left. I later found out he came through the window. The noise I heard, which I assumed was the door, was actually the window that fell downward and shut loudly, after I assumed the man came in. There were also some scratches on the top of the chair that I put under the doorknob, signaling he had tried to push it open but was unable to. There wasn't much of a case. I couldn't ID him, as he was wearing a face mask and a beanie. I don't even know what color hair he had, only that he was white, tall, slim, and a male. I only looked right at him for a mere second, if that. Nothing was stolen either. We have cameras and security systems now, never making that mistake again. So this happened to me about 12 years ago on Halloween night. I had just came back from trick-or-treating that night and was looking forward to eating all my candy in the living room and watching TV as late as I possibly could. My parents were normally strict about me going to bed at a decent time because otherwise I would be a zombie the next day. But it was Halloween night, so they were more lenient that night. So I ended up staying up till around 1:30 a.m., watched a lot of spooky movies, and ate about 30 candy bars. It was pretty awesome. After gorging myself, I felt I would just sleep on the couch, so I turned the TV off, and a couple seconds later, I heard a noise coming from our front porch. It was the sound of our old-fashioned porch swing moving back and forth. I was a little creeped out, so I slowly moved toward the window of my living room and peeked around the blinds toward the porch. Our porch light was off, but I could make out the form of someone sitting on the swing, rocking back and forth. I honestly flipped out immediately and ran screaming into my parents' room, telling them I saw someone on our porch. My parents saw that I was upset, but still my dad got really angry and told me that it was just a dream and to go back to bed. I refused and kept telling him there was someone sitting on our porch, until he had had enough and snatched my arm and dragged me towards the front door to prove that there was nothing there. I kicked and screamed all the way, trying to make him stop, but he kept pulling me. Finally, we got to the door. He turned on the porch light, unlocked the door, and swung it open and said, "See, there's nothing there." We were both frozen when we saw an older woman, maybe in her 50s, sitting on the swing in nothing but a nightgown. There was blood all over her stomach, and she was clutching a knife in her hand. She looked up at us with an empty gaze, only for a few seconds, until my dad slammed the door shut and got my mom to call the police, while he went and got his gun. He went back to the door with a 12 gauge and cracked the door enough to stick the barrel out. He asked her what she was doing, and she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad told her that the police were coming, and as soon as he said that, she stood up and walked off our porch. The police ended up finding her about 15 minutes later, trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. Later on, we found out that the woman had attacked her husband after they had had an argument, but didn't seriously hurt him. When she left the house, she slit her own wrist, so some of the blood on her nightgown was her own. It's crazy to think that all this happened in my little town. It's definitely an experience that I will never forget. I work for a popular grocery delivery service, which I will not be disclosing the name of. This happened recently, and I'm still reeling from it. I'm even debating quitting my job altogether and moving away from this town. My first strange occurrence happened about 4 months ago. There was nothing off-putting about the order itself, just some essentials. It was the actual delivery that gave me a weird feeling. I pulled up to the house and had to double check to make sure I was at the right address. The property was in total disarray. The grass was tall and unkempt, and large vines were taking over the front of the house. It looked totally abandoned. I grabbed the bags out of my trunk and walked along the badly cracked and uneven sidewalk that led up to the porch. I began knocking on the door and received no answer in return. I rang the doorbell. Still no answer. "Hello, I'm here with your groceries that you ordered. Is anyone home?" I knocked again and paused for a moment. I decided to peek in through the window. It was so filthy that the only thing I could see were the flies crawling all over the glass. I pulled back in disgust and started to make my way back to the car. I was sure that it must have been some kind of mistake and I was given the wrong address. I just reached the bottom of the step when the door cracked open behind me. "You can leave them on the porch. I'll get them later," an old, scratchy voice called out. I turned around to greet them, but I couldn't see anything beyond the cracked door. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't realize you were home," I said nervously. "That's quite all right, dear. In my old age, it's a bit hard for me to answer the door on time, so I don't mind if you drop them off on the porch. I'd hate to keep you waiting," the old woman said. "No worries, ma'am. I don't mind the wait," I said cheerfully. There was an uncomfortable silence for a moment, and I took that as my cue to leave. "Okay, well, thank you for shopping with us. Enjoy the rest of your day." The door shut abruptly as I left the porch. I didn't think too much of the experience. I assumed it was probably just an elderly woman who didn't like much company. I continued these deliveries to that house for the next several weeks, and made enough small talk with her to learn a little more each time. Her name was Dorothy Thornhatcher. She was a retired teacher who lived alone with no remaining family, so I made sure to have a friendly face on when I made her deliveries. Although it was kind of strange that I never saw her face through the cracked door. The nightmares started about a month ago. They were mild at first, but soon grew more intense and happened about once a week, the night of my delivery days. I always write down my dreams so I can try and analyze them later. These are some of the excerpts from my journal. September 1st, I was sitting on my sofa reading a book when I heard the voice of Dorothy calling my name. "Christine," she called softly. "Mrs. Thornhatcher? Is that you?" I asked. Suddenly, I heard the sound of pounding footsteps coming rapidly down my stairs. I jumped to my feet, but woke up before I could see who or what it was. September 8th. I was laying in bed. It was stormy outside. The only light that lit the room were the occasional crashes of lightning. My closet door slowly creaked open and a low moaning noise could be heard. The closet was pitch black except for a pair of glowing eyes that were staring back at me. I laid there, paralyzed in fear. "Who are you?" I stuttered out. In that moment, a large crash of lightning lit up the room, and I saw half of a decaying woman's face. I woke up gasping just as she lunges toward me. I chalked the first two dreams up to my overactive imagination. The final dream, however, gave me a bad feeling in my stomach that I could not ignore. September 15th. I heard the sound of water dripping in my bathroom and decided to investigate. The room was dark, except for the small amount of moonlight leaking in from the window. It was a constant sound that came in threes. Drip, drip, drip. Suddenly the dripping stopped and I turned around to face the shower. I watched in horror as a decaying, rotten hand slowly reached around the curtain and pulled it back. "Christine!" the monster shrieked. Its body made of rotting flesh, its hair dirty and matted. There was something especially disturbing about its face. It didn't have one. All the facial details looked like an oil painting that had been smeared. It began chasing me, and without even thinking, I ran in my hurry. I fell down the stairs and hit the bottom with a hard thud. The monster let out an ear-piercing shriek, and I could hear it rapidly approaching me. I tried to get away, but couldn't get up in time. The last thing I saw was the creature running at me. That's when I shot up in my bed. Feeling deeply disturbed by these nightmares, I debated if I should continue with these deliveries. That decision was made for me when I unknowingly made my last delivery about 2 weeks ago. Nothing was off about it at first, but my conversation with Dorothy soon took a strange turn. "Christine," she paused. "Yes, Miss Thornhatcher?" I responded. "What do you think happens when we die?" she said. I was caught a little off guard by the question. Well, personally, I'm not sure, but some believe in a heaven and a hell. I just think it comes down to what brings you peace. "Well, I don't think I'm going to heaven," she croaked. "Why would you say that? Where do you think you're going?" I stammered out. "Because I know I'm going somewhere worse than hell," she said, and began a low, twisted chuckle that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to get out of there, so I made up an excuse. "It's been wonderful talking to you, Mrs. Thornhatcher. I really must be going now because I have a lot of orders to fill today. Have a good day." I left in a hurry after that. The final time I went to that house was a week ago. I really didn't want to, but I felt bad because she was just a harmless elderly woman with no family to take care of her. There wasn't even an order that had to be placed. I just wanted to check on her. I knocked on the door. "Mrs. Thornhatcher," I called. No response. "Mrs. Thornhatcher, it's Christine. I'm just here to check on you." I knocked again. My stomach dropped when I noticed the groceries I had delivered last week still sitting on the porch, being devoured by insects and maggots. I began pounding on the door. "Mrs. Thornhatcher, are you all right?" I yelled. I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. As soon as the door opened, the putrid stench of rotting flesh hit my nostrils. I gagged at the foul odor, but pushed on and made my way through the room, and the smell just grew stronger and stronger. "Dorothy," I called out. I rounded the corner and stepped into the living room, and I gasped and tried to hold back my vomit. There in the armchair sat a rotting corpse. Her face was unrecognizable as there was a baseball-sized hole blown straight through it. Brain matter splattered all over the wall, maggots were feeding on the open wound, and a shotgun was laid about 5 feet from the body. I rushed out of the house and called 911. The most disturbing part about this was that the body was too decayed for it to have happened within the last week. It looked like it had been there for a few months at least. When police showed up, I tried to answer any questions that I could. I was in such a state of shock that talking was difficult for me. Upon entering the house, police were able to positively identify the body as Miss Thornhatcher, and estimated she had been there for at least 6 months. Police also found evidence of someone recently living in the walls, but they had already evacuated. Someone murdered her, and then pretended to be her for several months. I never got to know the real Dorothy. It's been a week, and I can't stop thinking about it. I'm convinced that her spirit was trying to contact me in my nightmares to let me know something was wrong. Police still haven't found her killer, and I think that's what disturbs me the most.